Thank you so much, Jane, for inviting me. I'd like to welcome all of my panel up to take their seats, first of all. So I think one of the reasons why Jane has asked me here is because before my life in blockchain, I spent about 15 years working in think tanks and public policy. And one of the things we did was trying to communicate complicated ideas around policy and get them to become more accessible and get them to a wider audience so that we could effect reform. And what we've been doing over the last year or so with a project called GovChain Research is trying to apply that same technique to how blockchain can be introduced into the public sector and used by government. So we had some great panels yesterday for those that were here, and welcome to everyone who's watching on the live stream, where we talked about the issue of the regulation conundrum and about some of the challenges of creating the right policy framework for how we can encourage blockchain companies to come to different countries. But what we're going to talk about today is actually government themselves using blockchain. So how can the public sector use blockchain? So there are various different examples. It could be something like medical credentialing, so saving doctors and nurses from having to keep redoing their paperwork. It could be different kinds of registries like land registry or vehicle registries. It could be delivering welfare services. It could be a lot of other examples that we're going to hear from the panel. So without going on too much, I'd first of all like to introduce all of my fantastic panel who've all been involved in some way, shape or form, either as service providers in delivering public sector projects in lots of different countries, or in trying to speak to governments about how to do that, or in the policy making process and in sort of mapping what's actually going on. So I'm just going to go down the panel from this direction downwards and just ask Lovin to start by introducing himself and explain a little bit about what he does and how it relates to public sector blockchain.
Thank you. So I'm Lovin. I am the director of Thusser Consulting, which is an emerging tech consulting firm focusing mainly on blockchain and crypto assets and looking at the policy implications around that. I used to work for the European Union as an advisor at the Parliament, specialising in this area. And that's actually where I met Helen, and we began discussing that there was a lack of information around a public sector implementation of blockchain and no single one place, and that's when we coordinated also with Cadre to create GovChain, which we had our launch of about 6 months ago now, which maps out across 25 jurisdictions public sector implementation of blockchain. So that's how we kind of came together and make this panel quite relevant.
Hi everyone, my name's Laura Bailey. I'm co-founder of Cadre. So we are a blockchain company that has an underlying blockchain platform built from scratch. So it's the infrastructure layer, and there we build products and services on top of that. I've been involved in the blockchain space now for probably about 6 years. And I also sit on the board of Tech UK and worked with these fantastic people on the GovChain project that I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about.
Hi everyone, Mohammed Salman Anjum. I'm breathing blockchain for the last 3 years, and as an educator, and now founded one entity in Dubai, and we are like delivering to projects now, implementation of the blockchain for the government side and United Nations body as well. And that's what we do, and that's why we are like, again, as relevant for this panel discussion.
So I guess my first question to all of the panel is, how far have governments actually got in implementing blockchain? You know, are there kind of countries that are the sort of leaders? You know, what is the kind of environment that allows them to do that, or the key factors that have allowed certain countries to push forward faster, and how can we learn from that? So maybe Lovin, you can go first, since we did kind of try to map this out with the project, look at the sort of green kind of adopters, the orange explorers, and the red skeptics. So what were the kind of leading places in your mind once you saw the research?
So one of the things that we had actually seen is that smaller jurisdictions found it a lot easier to implement blockchain services and kind of upgrade their infrastructure to do so. So across Europe, for example, the jurisdictions such as Gibraltar, Estonia, and Malta had implemented such sort of frameworks. For example, in Gibraltar, I'm sure many of you would know that they'd put in place the DLT framework, which attracted a lot of businesses to come and establish themselves in a jurisdiction with that regulatory certainty. But outside of Europe, one of the jurisdictions that we had also seen that had done extremely well was that of the UAE, and actually that's where we had been speaking with Mohammed. So actually, perhaps you would want to talk about some of the stuff from the UAE.
Yes, as you mentioned, small have been very quick. Switzerland is another thing. Singapore, along with the UAE, but UAE is, I believe, not because I'm based there. UAE in a year's time will be leading the use cases for all across the globe, because they are putting 50% of their transactions of government on blockchain. Will yield, actually, we were discussing about the yield or the ROI of blockchain, especially in the government sector. So they have already identified that $5.5 billion each year they will save based on their putting their e-services on blockchain. So that's the worth of one Burj Khalifa, which is the tallest building in the world. So they have calculated the ROI as well per year. And this is what they have done. Now it has a ripple effect in the other Middle East countries. They are now joining in the race of bringing their solutions on, at least doing the POCs and pilot projects for the government e-services on blockchain. I am from Pakistan originally, so that's catching up. We are doing 3 projects there. So going back to the basic of your question, where governments are at the moment, what's the trend? At least they have formed the differentiation. They got the understanding of the differentiation between the cryptocurrencies and the enterprise blockchain solutions, how it can be helpful. Even if they don't like the cryptocurrencies, they have some fears about that, but at least now they have formed this understanding that yes, blockchain for the digital transformation initiatives is very must. So and we are being approached now. 2 years back, we used to knock the doors and we used to go out and at least justify ourselves that we are not crypto guys. We are basically to help you and building up in your process development, digital process development and all that. Now they are asking us, okay, when can we have a meeting? So this is a progress, and this is not just in one region. We see, I travel a lot for different events. It's been happening everywhere. Even Mexico, last month I was there. So there is a strong appetite in governments now for the blockchain.
It's encouraging to hear that. Is that your experience as well, Laura? Because I know Cadre has been, one of the first providers of blockchain kind of POCs in the UK. How do you think things have evolved since those kind of days back in 2015 or so?
Sure. So with a lot of things, I'm going to say it depends. So Cadre, our underlying platform was the first ever blockchain to be used by a government. It was back in 2015 with the Isle of Man government, and it was a registry of companies. So that project was successful. Pilot was very positive. However, it wasn't taken forward. And I think this is where the barriers, or the hurdles, should I say, come up, which are natural. And it's not just governments. This is corporates as well. So it's the chicken and egg situation, which we were talking about earlier, in terms of comes back to a business case is needed to show how much money can be saved, or how can we increase security. And it's great that we're starting to get some figures and things like that, but that, along with the distinction, which I agree it's completely progressed now in terms of cryptocurrencies and blockchain, is another area that has slowed things down. However, I think we've got over that traction, and it's everything to play for. I mean, Lovin, you were saying that the smaller jurisdictions are doing well and progressing, and I'd agree with that. But at the same time, the information's now out there for it to be grabbed and moved forward with. So, yeah, now is the opportunity.
Yeah, that's the difference between UAE and other governments. They have approached it top down. The top tier, they recognize the utility of blockchain in their digital transformation initiatives. They calculated the ROI. They have enforced basically their IT departments and different authorities to come up and explore the opportunities or use cases for themselves on blockchain and other emerging technologies as well. So this is the difference between as we are discussing now, why they didn't follow up, because maybe there was not a top-down approach. So there was an IT department who was willing, maybe the authorities were not willing to take it forward. So that's the difference between the countries who have progressed, Estonia, Singapore, Switzerland, Dubai, they have all approached it in a top-down.
If I could just build on that, I think really interesting point. There is talking about blockchain and talking about blockchain implementation and talking about innovation and talking about what we need to do to solve world problems. And then there's actually investing, doing, trying, breaking, getting things wrong and iterating in that circle. And that's where boxes are ticked if it comes from the top-down approach of we must look into blockchain or we must explore it. It's kind of like we've explored it, tick the box and move on. Whereas actually, like with all things in life, you need to look beyond the initial KPIs and metrics of what are we trying to achieve here, and find the hurdles and smash them out of the water and prove them wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously identified some key points already. There's the proof of return on investment, so how much is it actually saving? And maybe at the beginning, that's just doing things that government already do in a slightly more efficient way, getting rid of paperwork and bureaucracy and cutting costs. But longer term, it could also be more innovative ideas that we don't do right now. Political leadership is obviously key, and maybe that's easier in smaller places where there's a sort of stronger pull to bring in business and to bring in with investment and jobs. And obviously there's also the policy environment. So I just wanted to bring Lovin in on this, because one of the things we did with the GovChain research was to try to not just map what was going on, see which countries were doing what, but also recommend changes and sort of identify common success factors. So obviously things like having a sandbox was one kind of identifying area, but also, I mean, what's been quite interesting is things like recent announcements from the US on safe harbor. How do you think that things have progressed since we first launched our recommendations? Do you think that the policy environment is improving?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually just to at first address the kind of top-down approach that was spoken, I think there absolutely needs to be leadership from the top, from the governments to really attract private actors to come and give them the confidence to develop products. But at the same time, there really has to be, which is one of the recommendations that we have on the GovChain report, is public-private partnership, because it can't be government making these decisions on what needs to be done. It really needs to be a strong communication between the two to understand what the potential of the technology is, really identify that, as Laura was saying, and then how this could be implemented to really benefit the citizen, which is the core focus of the government. And so this is actually one of the things that I think has been done very well across the EU. In 2017, the European Parliament did a report on virtual currencies, which had then recommended that the EU set up the EU Blockchain Observatory, which looked at use cases for blockchain, where it could potentially be useful for public services and for social good as well. And actually, it goes to Mohammed's point as well. This actually, first of all, started as a virtual currencies report, which then quickly transitioned to actually the technology. Distributed ledger technology is actually the real winner here of how we could use this in public services. So I think where we are in a policy space now is actually really interesting, because we're now seeing great movement from the European perspective, setting up the putting out a consultation paper on a European digital strategy, announcements earlier this week on the European blockchain service infrastructure, with nodes across Europe going live. And as Helen was saying as well, even from the US perspective now, there's a change in narrative from perhaps taking quite a stringent approach to this technology and crypto assets to SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce's safe harbor proposal, which is actually identifying yet again another GovChain recommendation of let's not kill these projects very early, give them some time to mature and to develop. So as per the safe harbor proposal, a 3-year period to see how a token matures gives companies a bit of good faith to be able to establish themselves in the market. And I think that's an approach that's been taken that I think is really positive and a positive trend that we've seen.
Yeah, that's what we believe, that 2020 is the year for showing blockchain, not telling about blockchain. And the use cases, platforms like GovChain can take it forward and bring it into the public and also into the decision makers, like on table of the decision makers, that this is what have been contributed by blockchain in this particular vertical of government, and of course in that vertical, in that region, in that authority. So once they will have around 100+ cases to see, their confidence of testing or even implementing it will be far more greater. So I'm very confident 2020, like there are many players in different regions bringing up the showcasing the blockchain solutions, not just telling in the events about the use cases of the blockchain, that it can do for healthcare in this thing, or it can do this, it can do that. It is doing this. That's what we are getting out of the blockchain. And that's, I think, will be the next year we will see a lot of adoption in the governments.
Yeah, I mean, I was really encouraged to see, when we were speaking in the panel prep about the different examples of use cases that you're working on in the different countries. So I think just the ones that you mentioned to me on the phone, this land registry, aircraft and aviation regulation, government document management, lots of different examples in different countries, Canada, Pakistan, Montenegro. So, already since we did our last research, there are new examples coming of different use cases, but also different countries that are starting to adopt, which is really encouraging. And I think the other factor is the more collaborative approach to regulation. So it's not just, as you say, that regulation is something that comes top down from policymakers that they sort of do to us as blockchain companies, but it's something that we work out together, what is the best approach that will facilitate innovation, but also ensure consumer protection and ensure that we don't get fraud and we don't get, things going wrong with people's money when we're talking about completely changing the way we handle digital assets and things like that. So it's a very interesting time. And I want to just come on to the issue of data management, because one of the things that was referenced in the panel sort of description was hacking and leaks of data. So obviously blockchain has some elements that could allow us perhaps to keep data more securely and to, as governments, to manage all the data that we hold. How do you think that blockchain is going to change that relationship between the sort of citizens' data and the way that government manages that? I know you're working on a few projects on that, so maybe you can kick off.
Yeah, that's what we identified. What is the real value of enterprise blockchain solutions, especially for the governments? It's basically the security of the data, which is the primary, paramount kind of importance for them. And we are not touching how we are different than other companies or other entities. We are not touching the functional layer. They already have invested millions of dollars on their Oracles, Microsofts, and XYZ. We are not touching that. In fact, we are additionally giving them a value by bringing a blockchain layer to give the integrity to their data and the workflow. That's what they are basically missing. Because of the centralized systems they already have, yes, there is one DBA pilferage can do any damage to any government authorities' record keeping. So with the help of distributed architecture in that existing setup of IT, you can help them. And this is our way forward in all these 6-7 projects which we were doing. Not touching the functional layer, just giving additional value to their data layer to their validation of data, and plus the process flow. This will take them to the next level, and they will come on to the distributed architecture altogether. So currently it's a hybrid approach. You can offer them just additional value of blockchain, and that will bring them to the taking it forward in the gradual manner.
I mean, Laura, what's your experience on that front? I think that's quite an interesting point, that you're not sort of attacking the existing systems. You're trying to offer an additional service that maybe improves on what's already there.
I think you articulated it perfectly. Blockchain, maybe even 2 years ago, was sold as the answer to all problems. It's an enabler to progress things in a very powerful way. And that's probably what I didn't articulate that well when I was speaking a couple of minutes ago, in terms of when you come up with hurdles and problems in projects and life, you've just got to solve them, right? Sounds easy, obviously it's not. But blockchain enables you to do that because it's exceptionally modular in terms of it's not one blockchain fits all or one distributed ledger. It comes back to the integration piece. And we were talking earlier about the chicken and egg comes back again, because we know that blockchain has the opportunity and the ability to save a significant amount of funds in every part of the economy and increase security. But you've got to enable a blockchain, the blockchain, whichever you want to use, to connect with existing systems so that they can help fix or improve the issues that are happening at the moment. So it really is an enabler, an answer to increase security. Now, again, there's ways that it can be done wrong. And it does come back to the architecture and the decisions that are made at the human level. So I think technology's there. It's about human pushing it forward in the right way with the right thoughts and morals in mind.
Okay, well, I think that's a very kind of clear framework for people to kind of understand how they could approach that. We've only got a few minutes left, so I wanted to close by just asking each of the panel. I mean, you all meet with policymakers at high levels on a regular basis. What's the one thing you want to say to them about why should government really care about and be implementing blockchain? Maybe Lovin can start.
I'd say current government services are not fit for purpose. They are not efficient, and blockchain offers the opportunity, a solution. It is an enabler, as Laura was saying, to provide better services for citizens. If we just look at for example, the distribution of welfare at the moment, the kind of loops and the hoops that people have to jump through to be able to get their welfare payments is inefficient, and often leads to people being either underpaid or for the system to be gamed. Actually, if we implement technology such as blockchain into this to provide more connected services, we can give one easy and efficient distribution of welfare, but also accurate distribution of welfare as well.
So I would say think about the bigger picture and take a step back. World problems that we're dealing with at the moment, and links into the next panel, I believe, sustainability. Blockchain really can help solve these problems. It can help decrease corruption, increase security, and make us more accountable for exactly the decisions and the actions that we're making. So it draws a lot together.
I agree with both these points, efficiency and the thing which we just mentioned. But the most important point for any government, any authority of government, is the trust. And blockchain is really bringing that trust to their services and their efficiency as well. So this is one area where when they understand, okay, if we provide our services on blockchain platform, people will trust us more. In fact, they will start trusting us. Basically, in their third world countries, this is the biggest deficiency factor on the governments and e-services provided by the governments. So putting the land records on blockchain, putting the birth records on blockchain, it gives them the trust factor, which is missing in those parts of the world, and blockchain is an enabler, and that's what I think is an easy selling point now these days for blockchain for the governments.
Yeah, all fantastic points. I think we can see many, many reasons. I mean, often when governments look at sort of policy to attract innovation, they're thinking about, you know, we want to create the right conditions to bring companies here so we have the jobs of the future and we have the economic impact, but it's also about a tool that they can actually use to deliver their own services to citizens and to solve bigger social and economic goals, whether it's climate related or something like false information, thinking about our current public health crisis, coronavirus, and I know a company recently that's just implemented a coronavirus tracker on distributed ledger just to be able to have accurate information on cases that are appearing around the world and make sure that governments aren't covering up information about the cases that are being discovered. So there's many, many reasons why this technology is going to be fundamental to our society, and just like to close by thanking a fantastic panel. If you want to find out more about GovChain, the website is govchain.world, and there's also a few of the pamphlets outside on the front desk, so if you haven't seen it and you want to pick up that little leaflet that summarizes the research, then please do help yourselves to a copy. But thank you very much to all my panel for a great discussion. And I look forward to, I'm staying on the next panel, so you're going to have to hear from me again to hear about sustainable finance. But thank you so much to my group.